I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek. So there was some big news in Star Trek last week.
Yes. If you're on the internet, you heard it already.
You know, this is in regards to the possibility of Quentin Tarantino pitching a story, maybe potentially writing, producing, or even directing a Star Trek motion picture.
At the very least, he's already probably produced hundreds of memes, right? So it's already happened in all our heads. Only I think what will actually happen, if it does happen, is not going to be what people are predicting.
I'm not really sure what to predict. I have a few ideas.
I thought it was kind of BS at first. I thought it was just like clickbaity articles because he mentioned Trek in an interview.
Right, yeah, with the Nerdist podcast.
Yeah, but then there's like kind of some actual momentum, some movement on it.
So we're just going to take a moment to look at the nitty-gritty of what transpired. This all started on December 4th, last week, when Deadline reported from inside sources that Tarantino had pitched an idea for a movie to J.J. Abrams. And I'm always skeptical when I see something with, like, inside sources.
Sure.
Kind of like those piece of shit sons of bitches at Midnight's Edge who got everything completely wrong about Star Trek Discovery, which has now been proven.
I don't have a role in this feud that you've got there. As I'm going to be the Trek peacemaker and try and bring you all together.
Good luck with that. But yeah, the same people who said that Star Trek Discovery would be set in an alternate timeline created by Sarek, and it would explain why Mark Leonard played 3 different characters.
Did they actually? Did they really run hard with that?
Yeah, they were also saying that Akiva Goldsman and Alex Kurtzman had left the show, that it won't actually be prime timeline, but they're having to do that for legal reasons, which don't actually exist if you take the time to look into it.
So basically they were clickbaiting their way through all of their stories.
They were either dishonest people who made shit up to get clicks, or they were just such morons that they were believing total BS and were unable to tell the difference between that and actual legitimate information.
I like to think that I'm up front when I'm a moron.
Me too.
Which is
That's
awesome.
what we do on Tex-Trek. We'll let you know when we're being morons. Like right now.
That's right.
But, yeah, so their Deadline, which is a more reliable
they are an actual
source of news.
Yeah.
They have a
track record.
Good track record, I suppose. You know, they're saying that these people have told them that Tarantino has talked to J.J. Abrams. And then on a few days later, on December 7th, they ran another article saying that now Tarantino had met for hours with a room full of writers, and that they were trying to find a scribe for the screenplay, and that they would possibly have Tarantino direct the movie. He needed it to be rated R, and supposedly Paramount said, okay, it can be rated R.
And so we feel like all of that probably occurred.
Well, no one is denying it. JJ is not denying it. Paramount is not denying it. Tarantino is not denying it. The screen...
I think you made it. Yeah, but off mic, I think you mentioned this, and I think that it's a reasonable point. Like, that's not to say it's true, but generally, when people are making up kind of BS about directors, like notable directors like that, they're probably gonna quash it.
Yeah, and
or their agents will. Their agent will say, "Nah, this is BS. Stop barking up this tree."
Deadline just doubled down on it within the course of 3 days. They said, like, "Oh, we actually have more info on there." These screenwriters that they're talking to are actually pretty interesting, and I'd be curious to see what kind of Star Trek movie they would write. You know, keeping in mind that it would be a movie based on Tarantino's idea, a screenplay based on his idea,
right?
You know, tailor-made for him to direct.
Right. It's sort of, this would be like as if he plotted and they sort of scripted.
Mm-hmm. So the writers that they're talking to, and the guy who is supposedly the front runner right now, Mark L. Smith, he wrote that movie, The Revenant.
Need to see it.
I actually thought it was boring. You would call it meandering and boring. I'm telling you that now. But a lot of people love it, so don't listen to me and Dave. You would probably like it.
They can listen to me. I haven't even. You're assuming what I'll say. I like some meandering, boring movies sometimes.
I don't think you'll like that. You might prove me wrong.
That's
it's a technical masterpiece. The way that they shot it with natural daylight, and they put Leonardo DiCaprio to an actual dead horse.
Yeah.
When he had to tauntaun up to survive the winter night.
Yeah. Tauntaun up, son. Yeah, I'll be curious to see. I've also certainly hit movies that I'm like, I don't know.
It has a cool fight scene in it.
Okay,
but you got to watch 2.5 hours.
Is it going to be better than the Gray, where Liam Neeson straps like spikes to his claws to fist fight a wolf?
I didn't see that, but
it was okay.
It's probably a little better than that.
Okay,
but you're gonna have to see some boring stuff before you get to it.
Anyway, but this is a pretty notable director.
Yeah, well, writer.
Writer.
Yeah, so Mark L. Smith,
right.
And he is, according to Deadline, the guy that
they maybe won an Academy Award or two.
Well, Leo won an award for. I don't know if the movie it might have won.
I believe broadly it would be considered
cinematography or something.
Award worthy. Probably got some nominations.
I don't keep up with awards because they give the Best Makeup Award Oscar to Suicide Squad instead of Star Trek Beyond.
Jeez,
but. The other writers that they're talking about also include Drew Pearce, who I'm actually half-assed familiar with him because I watched the Iron Man 3 Blu-ray commentary, and he co-wrote that movie with Shane Black, the Iron Man 3 director.
Okay.
He's this English guy who actually seemed like super knowledgeable about comic books, and him and Shane Black said it was kind of an arranged marriage going in. Marvel Studios had
put them together.
Yeah, and they actually worked together really well though. And I kind of like Iron Man 3, and from a screenplay perspective, I thought it was like a pretty well written movie.
One of my least favorite Marvel movies, but interesting in its failure, I'm going to say. I liked it more as a Shane Black venture than I probably did as a Marvel venture, but nevertheless, an interesting person. I don't. I'm already going to assume, that movie sort of subverted expectations for a superhero movie. If Tarantino makes a Star Trek movie, I'm going to assume it's going to subvert it.
Yeah, there's going to be some subversion.
He's not going to make the Trekkiest Trek movie of all time with the cliches of debating ambassadors and the ship gets blown up and a moral quandary that I don't know. Only the captain can decide. It's going to be different.
Yeah, and Drew Pearce also wrote some stuff for Runaways on Hulu, which I haven't watched yet.
I haven't either. I hear it's getting solid, very, very good reviews.
Yeah, apparently very different from the comics, but still good.
Yeah.
He wrote Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. I'm not sure which Mission Impossible that is. I only saw the first two and then stopped watching.
I think, you should, if you have any love of the idea, you should catch the last few. Rogue Nation and what was the one just prior to that? Ghost Protocol.
Yeah.
Particularly Ghost Protocol because it's directed by the Iron Giant guy. Rogue Nation was the follow-up to that, which was not as good. Still pretty good.
Yeah, I might check those out. Drew Pearce is also writing Sherlock Holmes 3. I didn't know they were making one, but
that bodes a little bit less for him because I did like the first one.
I didn't like either. Well, I didn't see the second one because everyone said it sucked, and I didn't like the first one that much.
Yeah.
So,
still, interesting perspective. Interesting. I would say I'm not if I found out this guy was writing the script, I would not be like, this is a lost cause. I could see him working with Tarantino. Whether any of this will work well with Star Trek remains to be seen. But let's go. Who's our third guy?
The third is Megan Amram. I believe is how you say her. I'm assuming it's her last name. I couldn't find anything about her.
Huh.
But the fourth writer that we're going to talk about is actually the one who's kind of the most interesting to me. Her name is Lindsay Beer.
Okay.
And she is involved with a lot of projects that haven't come out yet, but these include the upcoming, in development, Masters of the Universe movie, the Dungeons and Dragons movie. They're apparently doing a ROM movie, and they're doing, what was the 80s cartoon, Mask? Yeah, they're doing that.
This is the one
she's writing all of those.
This is the one that ties, this is the comics did this too, where they have a shared universe for all those things now.
Oh, is that what they're doing?
Yeah. I hate to say it, but it's the whole Marvel Phase 1, Phase 2 integration of properties.
Or what they're doing with the Universal monster movies.
Yeah, or were before I think the last one tanked.
Well, they did two attempts. They did the Dracula and then they did the Mummy, and apparently no one
neither
liked
of them really took off. Yeah, Uh, that's your most interesting one? No, that
Well,
sounds terrible.
I didn't know that that's what they were doing. Like, I was just like, oh my god, she must be really into all these things.
Actually, I don't know for sure that that's exactly how they're meaning to structure it, but it is the shared universe thing.
She has a writer's credit on all of those, though. I just assumed like she was like pinning all of them.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that, because here's the crazy thing. You know who else was associated with those film projects? The novelist Michael Chabon, who's, award-winning novelist Michael Chabon from The Escapists and Wonder Boys and some other stuff. And Brian Vaughan, the award-winning comics writer from Saga, Why the Last Man,
Runaways. Runaways the comic, not the TV show that Drew Pearce has worked on.
Right. Yeah, they got like some huge people to work on the development of it. So I don't know if it's still moving forward, or if they looked at how the Universal Monster thing is going and they're like, maybe we should rethink this. But be that as it may, those movies have had some pretty big talent associated with it. So if she's associated with them, she could be good. On the other hand, I don't know if anybody who writes a Mask movie can ever be good.
Well, I have some concerns about Tarantino directing a Star Trek movie.
Really? Why? He seems like he's classic Trek guy. He's all about people forming a peaceful solution, and the way Picard would hammer out his negotiations with them.
Like his depiction of his version of the conclusion of World War II. It's like the most peaceful way to go about it. Which I actually love that movie. I love Inglourious Basterds, and I'm going to talk about that movie for a second because. Dave, I mentioned to you, just before I get to Inglourious Basterds, I mentioned to you a while back about how when I was a young boy, I was like 9 years old when I saw Star Trek Generations when it came out on VHS in '95. And when the moment where Kirk dies, which I actually think is a very big failure of that movie to deliver on a satisfying death and a missed opportunity, but as the remains of that catwalk falls with him, and I wanted him to say bridge on the captain as opposed to captain on the bridge. And I always thought that if I was making that movie, I would push for that line to be in there, and I'd get shot down. Like Rick Berman would slap me in the face and say, no, you can't do that.
Do you know how right he would be to do that?
But here's my... I was also, had a weird sense of humor as a kid.
Sure.
I don't really think that's changed, but... I thought that if I was Quentin Tarantino, though, I could get away with it. Because he's a guy who, no matter how wacky his idea is, no one stops him. He's made a big enough name for himself that he can just push that in there.
Sure, here's a guy who can, in Django Unchained, just drop a ultra mellow 60s song, what is it, I've Got a Friend... in there, or I forget what it's actually called, but that's the sort of refrain. Just drop a 60s song in the middle of it.
Or I think the greatest example, Inglourious Basterds. There's actually an older movie, I think from the 70s, called Inglourious Basterds. It's like a Dirty Dozen type war movie.
Yeah.
It inspired Tarantino to make his Dirty Dozen type war movie. And he said, I'm going to call it Inglourious Basterds, the same title as this movie inspiring me. And I picture there's a conversation between him and maybe Harvey Weinstein, who's in the middle of raping someone. and he says, but Quentin, you can't call it Inglourious Basterds. There's already a movie called Inglourious Basterds. And he's like, oh, it's okay, I'll just spell it differently. It's like, there's not an alternative spelling of Inglourious or of Bastards. And he's like, I'll make one up. And so he did.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I'm going to kill Hitler in it with machine guns, even though that did not happen in real history and is blatantly inaccurate. I don't care. I don't care about historical accuracy. I'm doing my movie. I don't care if it's called something else. I don't care if that's not how you spell these words. I'm doing it. No one's going to stop me. And that kind of scares me because that's the type of guy who, if he wanted to say bridge on the captain, could do something that ridiculous in a Star Trek movie.
That could be the least ridiculous thing he does.
Yeah, that could be we could be like, well, we only hope that he would have stopped there, but...
Yeah.
So it is kind of scary for me, as someone who cares about the entire universe and the canon and the continuity.
Yeah. Well, before we get into do we really think he would go full Tarantino? Is it going to have a 70s music montage over the credits, which will appear before the movie, of course, and we'll scroll down in the style of an old movie? Before we get into that, do we think this is going to be set in the Kelvin universe. Because here's my quick take on that. If it is in the Kelvin universe, I've enjoyed those movies. I don't quite really feel that they're Trek. I don't like the whole thing where Spock in the prime timeline goes back in time. That means zero to me. Like, I don't consider that to have happened. I consider the prime timeline... I don't give a shit. I consider the prime timeline sacrosanct and untouched. And if they ever go into that in the shows, or they show something in, like, do a post-Voyager show and they show that...
No, yeah.
I will be sad.
If they do a post-Voyager show, they're going to explain, like, Romulus got destroyed and Spock went through a black hole.
I pray to God that they just ignore it.
That's not going to happen.
But I do anyway. So that's how much I want these movies, because they really do not feel... They're in tone so very different from Star Trek, the TV show.
I can make an argument that they're more similar to the original series than anything else Star Trek has done.
You know,
but I get what you mean. I get where you're coming from.
The ethos is off. Everybody is a rebel in it. It's much more pop and popcorn. Admittedly, the Star Trek movies have always had that element of it. They've kind of been more action stories than thinking stories, even if that's percolating in the background. But anyway, if he were to do his crazy shit with the Kelvin verse, that would be a lot more amenable to me than if it was supposed to be, like, say, in the Prime universe, because I don't mind. He could do anything with that universe.
And here's my thing: is I don't think he will. I think he'll want to do his own thing that's been, like, untouched, that he can just
an original crew and shit.
Yeah, he'll want to cast his own actors, and they're at, like, a really good stopping point if they want to, like, stop the Kelvin movies with Star Trek Beyond. That's like a really good ending. Right,
and they could do their. You think they would set about exploring other areas of the world? You know what's interesting? It's funny that the one guy worked on one of the Mission Impossible movies. At this point, there's been, like, 5 different directors. It's basically like big name sort of action directors. If you want a shot at Mission Impossible, you probably can get it. And sort of the Mission Impossible movies, even though they all share a certain continuity, they're also all a little bit different. And by the way, if you stopped at 2, I forgot. I actually watched 3 recently. That's the one that's directed by Abrams, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was much better than I thought it was going to be.
That's what I hear.
And of course, it had Philip Seymour Hoffman, which was a huge asset. But anyway, it was actually really pretty good. I don't know what my point is. My point is that if it goes off and this is the point where they do their own thing, a little bit like Mission Impossible, and they let other directors play in the sandbox, I'm probably okay with that. I don't want Star Trek to completely lose what it was, and arguably those movies already were losing some of what it was. But they're also so much their own thing that I'm kind of okay with it.
But and the idea that it's going to be like an R-rated movie, there's nothing in those Kelvin timeline movies that I can kind of picture being... I don't see how you make a sequel to that, and it
suddenly becomes R.
Yeah, like the tone just doesn't
translate. They're still kind of they're still family friendly-ish, even if they had the Beastie Boys drop the F-bomb in one of the things, or maybe 2.
Just the thing with Tarantino is that he's always been able to, like, cast the entire movie himself, and pick the actors he wants.
Yeah,
and I think he also writes characters, or has people write characters for specific actors. Like Samuel L. Jackson will probably have a character created for him in this movie.
I have a feeling, like, that's the one cliche that people have been mentioning is, that I actually think probably could happen, is that Samuel Jackson will show up as an admiral.
Or a Klingon.
Or a Klingon. Or like, there's almost anybody who could be pretty entertaining. And we also, by the way, Discovery crossed the F-bomb threshold.
Yeah, so that's been
it's out there.
That's another concern
in the
of mine.
Timeline.
It's another concern of mine is I don't mind where like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they make so many different movies and shows and everything, and sometimes they do like the more mature stuff. Like I haven't watched the Punisher show on Netflix
right. But compared to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., we know it's a more serious outing.
And like the kid who is going to go see Thor Ragnarok probably is not going to be watching the Punisher show on Netflix.
He will be. His parents just won't know about it.
But I kind of wish that like Star Trek would be like completely into this more mature territory. I don't mind it. I think that you can do a lot of good stuff in that arena, but I kind of don't want it. Ideally, I want us to have like multiple shows on the air. I want us to have movies every couple of years. I want there to be a lot of Star Trek, and I don't want it to all be this darker, more mature, more adult-oriented content.
Right.
It wouldn't
Honestly,
bother me that
the
much.
truth of the matter is that Trek, as much as I love it, does not always try. I mean, part of what we like about it is not that it feels like our real world. It is that it feels like a sort of utopian vision. And maybe it's a little bit weird that utopian vision seems to have removed swearing, but then again, any show produced prior to like the 90s, really, unless you were a cable show, removed that.
Yeah.
But it's not one of those things that instantly makes Trek better, or making Trek more relatable through it doesn't necessarily make it better. But it can work, as we've seen, I think, with Discovery. Some people are still bothered by it, though. Some people still...
And overall, I think people do need to get over it a little bit. I can kind of understand their concerns, but I don't personally mind that type of stuff.
I think to some degree it just kind of comes down to they want it to still be a show that they can share with their kids, which is almost certainly when they first discovered Star Trek.
I'll show it to their kids. I don't give a shit. But if we're going to go back into the Prime universe with this movie, which I think is probably more likely than them doing the Kelvin universe, I'm curious if they'll use any...
Oh, you think it'll be in the Prime universe?
I think that's more likely than the Kelvin universe. It could be either, it could be something else. But,
Right, it could just be like a weird Tarantino, kind of his own opus, where they don't even... I mean, they might not even say. They could just use designs from whatever they want. It's so weird, by the way, to imagine him overseeing something of like a big budget special effects thing like this. I can't. It's hard for me to conceive
working with a big studio, so doing like an independent production where he has like complete creative control.
Are all the ships going to look like the 70s?
We thought Discovery was the disco. We haven't seen the Tarantino ships yet. I'm curious if it is Prime, what elements of that Prime universe will he use, or what characters?
Well, so in the interview, he talked about like some favorite episodes of his, and he wasn't talking about like the edgiest stuff, but he was talking about like Yesterday's Enterprise.
Yeah, and City on the Edge of Forever.
And City on the Edge of Forever, and these are both very well liked episodes, beloved episodes even.
Very similar episodes too.
Yeah,
they're doing with time travel.
What was Yesterday's Enterprise?
That was with Rachel Garrett on the Enterprise C. When that Enterprise showed up in the present time, and it altered the timeline, and the Federation was at war with the Klingons, and they figured out that...
Is this Crazy Riker?
No. They figured out that they had to send the Enterprise C back in time so it could go fight the Romulans, and that would fix the timeline.
Right.
And Tasha Yar, who was brought back when the timeline altered, went along with them.
Right.
And so, yeah, he liked these episodes about like...
I mean, that's a pretty geeky cut. I mean, not that those are like the deep, like super deep cut episodes, but the stuff he was talking about was not Tarantino, what things we consider Tarantino stuff.
Well, City on the Edge of Forever, a very similar story where Helen Keller's death played a big role in shaping the mythology of the universe.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if his story and his movie will be something like that. And I'm going to get back to that in a second, but one actor who has talked about working with Tarantino recently, Patrick Stewart.
Yep.
Before any of this started, he had done an interview with Variety. They were talking about the movie Logan, and he was asked what was the possibility of him returning as Captain Picard, and his response was...
Oh, I didn't realize this interview went back to the Logan era, so it was not in response to any of
this was actually more recent. It was like 2 weeks ago. They were talking about like Logan at the Oscars and stuff like that. But they did ask him about...
if anything would make him return as Picard.
Yeah, and he said... Oh Lord, I cannot think of another instance in which that might happen. My feeling is I hung up the spacesuit and left all that behind a long time ago. Maybe if someone came up with a brilliant idea, I'd do it. One thing that might interest me would be to bring all the existing cast of Star Trek from the last 50 years together for one big story. I actually think that would be kind of cool. But then... I don't know, they talked about doing that before, where they have like a big like Avengers type movie where like you have like Captain Picard, and then you could have someone from Voyager, and then someone from Enterprise comes into the present, and you have like this big massive team up. I've always wanted them to do that.
I definitely don't want them to do that. To me, that's getting into that Star Wars prequel territory. It's getting into Yoda high-fiving Chewbacca.
That was going to be the next movie after Star Trek Nemesis. That was
I'm glad that series tanked.
The guy who wrote Nemesis had I think his name was David Logan or James Logan. I'll remember it later, but he wrote Gladiator, I think. But he had an idea for that, and I always thought it sounded cool.
I get the basic concept of... there is a part of me that wouldn't mind seeing Janeway talking to Picard, talking to Kirk.
So does that bother you when there's a Justice League comic where you're like, what the shit is this? Batman and Superman know each other? Poppycock.
No, that's the basis of the whole comic. But if they, it's really when, like... First of all, it's weird that, like, the Enterprise is such a magically gifted ship that it's, like, been involved in every single major event in the history of the Federation at this point. So it's already kind of stretching my credulity a little bit doing that. And then if all the captains also meet and have a big adventure, it's fan wank is what it feels like. And I'm not above that.
Yeah, I'm a fan who wants to be wanked.
But it's... I can think of many, many other things that I would rather see first.
I want to get some Deep Space Nine characters back, so anything that could do that. We're getting off topic, though. So after he gave this answer to Variety, that kind of made the rounds on the internet, so people were like, oh, he said he might return, completely ignoring the fact that he said, I probably never will.
Right. That's not a story. Returning is a story.
Yeah. But after the Tarantino news broke, he talked to Hollywood Reporter, and he let them know about how he would love to work with Quentin Tarantino. He said, but one of my dreams is to work with Tarantino. I admire his work so much, and to be in a Tarantino film would give me so much satisfaction. So if he is going to direct something to do with Star Trek, and there was the possibility of dear old John Luke showing up again and doing that for Mr. Tarantino, I would embrace it.
You know what I take from that? Patrick Stewart desperately wants to say the N-word.
That's possible. Although he did in that Green Room movie.
Oh, geez, yeah, he was like an actual Nazi.
Yeah, he plays like a legit Nazi.
Yeah, that was a disturbing movie. No, I mean, that makes sense. Everything I know about Patrick Stewart is that he enjoys, I think, also, in addition to being a Shakespearean guy, he kind of enjoys playing against type, and he's done this in what's the comedic thing that he did recently, where he
what's it called, like Hardball or something? Or no, that's not the name of it.
Whatever it is, he's playing a very messed up dude, sex, drugs, and all of that. I'm sure that got a lot of that out of his system. Blunt talk, yeah. I'm sure he exercised every last bit of the goodness of Picard out of him in that. But he's always seemed like a great guy. I have a feeling that Tarantino's love... Actually, I was going to say, I was guessing it was more in the TOS era, but if he was talking about Next Generation and the thing, maybe... I suspect he was probably not thinking of a Patrick Stewart venture.
Well,
a part of me does want to see it, but at the same time, if Patrick Stewart shows up, if Picard shows up, I want Picard to be Picard, not Tarantino's Picard, if that makes sense.
So here's my thing on that, is that I've had this idea for what I'd like to see in a fourth Star Trek movie.
Fourth Kelvin-verse movie?
Yes. That I would like to pitch to Mr. Abrams and Mr. Tarantino right now. So here's my idea. You can forget about Drew Pearce. You can forget about Lindsay Beer. I'll write the script for you. I've already started on it. But my idea would be that we bring in Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, because they're already contractually obligated to come in, and any of those other actors that want to show up. Of course, you're not going to have Chekhov around because of Anton Yelchin's passing, so you just say, he's off serving on the Reliant now, to explain him not being there. And they talked about previously about doing something where you have Chris Hemsworth's character, George Kirk, the father of James Kirk, about bringing him back in. So I say you do this
Which would be difficult because he's dead.
Right, but you do a time travel type thing. You bring in Patrick Stewart, has gone back in time after Spock did, so he's back in the Kelvin universe. So you get Patrick Stewart in there. And then Tarantino can do his whole City on the Edge of Forever or Yesterday's Enterprise thing, where it's like, the entire mythology of Star Trek is at risk. We have to fix the timeline. And you have this nice little time travel adventure. And it ends with Chris Pine actually, because they've had to go back in time and team up with his dad, George Kirk. And Chris Pine is able to do something where maybe he sacrifices himself, but he's able to stop Nero from coming back in time and destroying the Kelvin and killing his dad.
Which was what set all the Kelvin-verse
He's
motion.
able to save his dad's life, and the entire Kelvin universe is reset, and it just goes back to the Prime universe. And we get to see Patrick Stewart again as Picard. Tarantino can do his good mythology story. And we get Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto coming back because they're contractually obligated to do that anyways. And JJ gets to have Chris Helmsworth again. So everybody's happy. It's a complete win-win scenario. The opposite of a Kobayashi Maru.
Everybody's happy except for me. No, I could see that working. I could see it working. And if you wanted to have a last hurrah with a lot of the big captains and stuff in there, I honestly would be down for it. I also like, of course, the idea of wiping out the Kelvin-verse. Although in a certain way, I kind of just want to let it go off and like it can be its own thing, so fanfic can eternally write about how it might have gone, what the next generation would look like in the Kelvin-verse, and all of that stuff. I sort of do want to see what they would do with Next Generation if they did that. But anyway, that said, it goes against the same distaste I had for for getting all those actors together on the same stage. There's something about it that's always going to rub me the wrong way about Trek being that incestuous, a timeline where they all meet each other and have a fan wank team up. But you know what? If Tarantino did it and it became very much about the personalities, I would assume, involved. Not that he doesn't have plots running through his stuff, but they very much are delivered very often through kind of extended conversations.
Yeah,
and they're
very much like character studies. All of his movies,
Mm-hmm.
the actual plot tends to be normally very simple things, or even like old cliche things, like the boxer who refused to throw a fight. That's Daredevil #1.
Right, but as depicted, it's very memorable because of Bruce Willis's personality.
Yeah,
his wife.
His
personality?
girlfriend,
wife, whatever.
Christopher Walken's little cameo.
And a memorable incident involving a pawn shop.
Yeah.
It's extremely memorable. So, yeah, man, I would not mind seeing Picard doing those scenes. Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, I think, would be up for that kind of material.
Who doesn't want to work with Patrick Stewart and Tarantino?
Yeah.
You think Chris Pine is going to be like, I don't know. They might be slowing me down. I'm doing fine with my career without them.
Hey, his Netflix thing, Gerald's Game, was great.
Yeah, and I'm sure...
Is that Chris Pine? No, that's not Chris Pine. That's the guy who played Pike. Never mind. I made it up.
Oh.
Who is that guy?
The guy who played Pike?
Yeah.
Bruce Greenwood.
Yeah, it was Bruce Greenwood.
Did the voice of Batman on Young Justice.
Yeah. This is me being a moron, y'all. Carry on. Here's the elephant in the room, real quick. We got to address it. Do we think it's going to have Tarantino, all of his trademark stuff, or any of it? Like, is somebody going to get tortured? Is there going to be one of those foot fetish scenes? Is anybody going to drop the N-word? There's no way. There's zero way that happens.
Okay, well, here's the thing with that. Is
it going to be... It's going to be violent, though. I bet it's going to have some violence in it.
Paramount didn't do too well with Star Trek Beyond.
Right. Which is too bad because it was really good.
Yeah, it was... most people consider it the best or the second best of the 3 Kelvin movies. An improvement over Star Trek Into Darkness. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people felt like it definitely got back on track to the type of stories they want to see in Star Trek. It felt like it could be an episode on the original series in a lot of ways.
By the way, I would say it's a good example of taking an episode and blowing it up into a movie, whereas I felt like Star Trek Insurrection was an example of that going badly.
Yeah.
Just kind of boringly.
Or also Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, I would actually watch Insurrection first.
The thing is, though, with Paramount, kind of disappointed in that movie's performance. Also with Paramount isn't doing as well financially anymore as they were doing before, and they're probably a little concerned about that. And they also have new leadership. There's a new CEO of Viacom and a new CEO of Paramount. And all the ingredients are there for them to be a little bit more risk-taking, doing unconventional stuff.
It is interesting because, Trek... 10 years ago, let's see, I'm trying to think. 10 years ago, Enterprise wrapped?
Yeah, it was May of 2005.
Okay. 10 years ago, Star Trek was on nobody's tongue. The Abrams movies and so the Kelvinverse movies kind of put it back on everybody's radar. Discovery is putting it back on people's radar. And definitely people are talking about this, even if they're kind of saying it, they're joking around about it. There is huge buzz about it. So, I mean, it could go very well for them. It would be an interesting risk to take, and I think if you were going to bank on some risky version of it, banking on a director like Tarantino, who's had so many hits, doesn't seem like that big a risk.
Yeah, and he's probably the most consistent filmmaker in Hollywood. I love every movie he's done.
That's an interesting notion. I might actually agree with that. Like, I'm very big into the... oh, geez, now I suddenly can't say their name. The Coen brothers. But they even have... Sometimes they'll put out a sort of more of a sleeper movie, and it'll go under my radar, and I'll just be like, oh, I'll catch that some year or another and get around to it eventually. Overall, they're probably have the most even track record for me, but Tarantino would be way up there, though.
And here's another thing, is that Tarantino said that he's going to stop making movies. I interpret that as being like, he doesn't want to be like Ridley Scott and just get to a point where he makes shitty movies.
Right.
Although I did like The Martian.
Yeah, we got to give him The Martian.
He says he thinks 10 is probably the number where he'll stop.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing the weird Charlie Manson movie next, where Margot Robbie is going to play Sharon Tate.
Right.
And then after that will be movie number 10. Will his big corporate studio Star Trek franchise movie
be his farewell to filmmaking?
Movie.
Yeah. At the very end of Inglourious Bastards, spoiler warning here, when, what was it, Colonel Aldo Ray? Is it Colonel? Is it Colonel?
I think so.
When he cuts a swastika into Christoph Waltz's head, his last line as he's looking at him is he's like, that just might be my masterpiece, or something to those effect. And I'm like, that also feels like it's something you do, like, I don't know if Tarantino was meaning to be meta there, if he really felt that, like, this was his best home run he'd ever hit.
That's how I feel about that movie.
But it sort of feels like the kind of thing you might say if you were, kind of also, like, jerking yourself off, for your final movie. It does seem weird to imagine Trek as a final one, but then again, he's kind of an iconoclast, or maybe he'll say that one doesn't count and he'll do one more after that. Yeah. Or he could be like Miyazaki, considered like the top of his game, has retired and come back like 3 times.
Or Michael Jordan.
Right. Have any of those been like what you would call a successful return? Semi-successful?
I mean, yeah, he like came back from baseball and won championships again, but then like when he came back, like went to the Wizards, it was like, no, like Michael Jordan, you need to, you're not as good as you used to be.
Yeah.
But he's still better than a lot of guys in the NBA at the time. But yeah, he was definitely well past his prime.
Right. So anyway, broadly speaking, are you excited about this? Are you trepidatious? Are you appalled? I know some people who are appalled.
Yeah. So
I think that Trek is sacrosanct to them, and putting Tarantino on it would be like letting Charles Manson direct it.
Actually, I was born in '86. When I was a kid in the '90s, around like 1994, when Pulp Fiction came out and when Star Trek Generations came out. I got into Star Trek.
Those merged for you?
Well, they didn't merge, but I got into Star Trek and Tarantino around the same time, and just like growing up in like the '90s, like those are 2 great things. Star Trek being my favorite thing ever, Tarantino being my favorite filmmaker. Mm-hmm. The idea of them crossing never occurred to me. Even then in the 90s, when they were both at their height, the majority of Star Trek was created in the 90s.
Right.
And that's when Tarantino made a name for himself, was in the 90s. Never occurred to me that those 2 things should ever intermix. So it seems weird. It seems kind of sacrilegious. It seems just, I don't know, like...
You're accurate. Those are all true things. But could it be good?
It feels like your best friend fucking your mom. You're like, I love both of these things separate, but like together, it's a little weird. But I don't. Maybe if I had some time to get used to it, I could really like it.
You're like, I could watch this.
I don't know about that.
Sorry, that was your metaphor, man.
I could be like, I'm happy for the 2 of you.
I don't know where to take that one. I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to say that I am tentatively kind of excited for it. And part of it is based on the movies at this point being something that I do consider a separate viewing than the regular TV show stuff.
Speaking of TV show stuff, he did direct an episode of CSI in like 2004, which I didn't watch. But like he can.
But
like,
we
go
presume
in and...
it was not Samuel Jackson 70s music, blaxploitation. Somebody was probably not necessarily tortured.
Well, I think someone was tortured. I think there's someone like buried alive or something, like in Kill Bill.
He is very much into that. That seems to be
him and Mel Gibson.
The most common thing in all of his movies. There's like the
secret Hollywood elite sex dungeon where like Tarantino and Mel Gibson both hang out in there and they like torture each other or like jumper cables on their nipples, like the tardigrade in Star Trek Discovery.
That's going to be the mirror universe tardigrade, is per our prediction.
Yeah,
the one that's way into it.
Yeah, the S&M tardigrade. So that's the movie Tarantino is making with Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, part of me wants it to be everything people fear, just because I'm like, it's still probably going to be entertaining. But I don't want... the one thing I don't want to happen is for this to be like so Tarantino or so bizarre that Trek goes down in flames as a result of it, and nobody can imagine Trek being the kind of hopeful, optimistic, sci-fi, slightly cerebral action series it was before, because he just makes it too weird for everybody.
What if he's playing around with the holodeck and he can do like all like the cool vintage pulp stuff that he likes doing? If he's with Patrick Stewart and they're doing like the Dixon Hill detective stuff and you have like the 40s music play, like Tarantino would have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, but you know what he would have? I think he would have something like a bug in the system or whatever that pushed it forward to the 70s. and then Dixon Hill would be like working with Shaft and shit.
Yeah.
I mean,
or no, that's where Samuel L. Jackson comes in.
Sort of
he's like the blaxploitation holodeck program.
Yeah, like it could almost work. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
We got to wait for it to see more information. It's just way more than it moved along much quicker than I thought it would.
Yeah, and we might not ever hear anything more of this. This might just be something that fades away
and people will just know about it when their Facebook says 5 years ago today, and you're like, oh, it's that Tarantino meme.
You know, it's like when Wolf Peterson was going to do a Batman and Superman together movie.
Wolfgang Peterson, yep.
Yeah, Wolfgang Peterson, and that was like in 2003 or 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then
that
never happened.
It was in I Am Legend as a movie in the background.
Yeah, they were talking about casting Colin Farrell as Batman and Jude Law as Superman, and which would have been weird.
Really?
Yeah. But yeah, so this might never happen. It might happen. We probably won't talk about it again on Tex-Trek until something we get like an official confirmation or something else. But definitely let us know what you think. If this is a good idea, if this is a bad idea. Give us your pitch for Quentin Tarantino and J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, and you know what? I am most interested to hear what anybody might think that's not just the cliches. I want to see if anybody can like come up with something that really feels like what he might do.
And I think this is just going to be a quick video, but I think we've extended this into the 30th podcast of Tex-Trek.
Yes.
So
the 10-minute plan that could have gone to 18 minutes has probably gone to like 38
45 minutes.
Yeah.
But we will be back soon to talk about... We have two things on the horizon. One is we'll finally talk about Star Trek Discovery Desperate Hours, the novel that we've been wanting to talk about for a while. And Star Trek The Next Generation, Mirror Broken.
The comic.
The comic book of the Next Generation crew set in the Mirror universe. We're going to be talking about that really soon.
Yep. All the various other media, while the TV show is away, we'll talk about movies, comics, and books.
Yeah, and then we'll be back talking about Star Trek Discovery January 7th, or shortly thereafter. I'm going to be on the Star Trek cruise when that's going on. And I'll also be updating y'all on the kind of shenanigans that I'm getting into in the Caribbean with a bunch of Star Trek actors.
It should be awesome.
Yeah, so until next time,
live long and prosper, y'all.
Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of Tex-Trek. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter at Tex-Trek, or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fathereeactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.